This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
We have the latest updates on the coronavirus outbreak, plus how the world is uniting to combat the virus. New Deal averts crippling industrial action by civil servants in Zimbabwe. And we tell you how Nigerian women are fighting back against gender-based violence. Hello and welcome to Africa Live, only on CGTN. I'm Karen Roberts, live in Nairobi. Hannah Viviers joins me now with all your business headlines.
Thank you so much, Karen. Well, here's what's coming up in business tonight. Mobile operators Airtel and Telkom appeal against tough merger conditions set by Kenya's regulators. And the IMF warns South Africa against delays on vital economic reforms. I'll be back with those stories and more business news making headlines today. But here's Karen with the latest.
Thank you very much.
Affairs.
Thank you, Hannah. Hundreds have now died from the coronavirus. The death toll has climbed to 213 people, all in China. Nearly 200 people have recovered. The total number of cases globally is approaching 10,000, most of them in China. More than half are in Hubei province, where the virus was first discovered last month. More than 100,000 people are under medical observation. There are 122 confirmed cases outside China. Thailand has 19, Japan has 17, and Singapore has 16. And Russia has confirmed its first 2 cases. No case has been reported in Africa. Well, China's ambassador to the United Nations says the measures taken to contain the new coronavirus have been effective and there has been progress in the fight against it. He also says international cooperation and solidarity are crucial in the current situation.
China has adopted a transparent and open and a responsible attitude in promoting international cooperation. We have reported to WHO from the very beginning of all the relevant information, seeking for their guidance. We are still at a very critical stage in fighting the coronavirus. International solidarity is extremely important, and for that purpose all countries should behave in an appropriate and responsible manner.
Well, US President Donald Trump has reassured Americans about the coronavirus outbreak, saying his country will cooperate with others to combat the virus.
We think we have it very well under control. We have very little problem in this country at this moment, 5, and those people are all recuperating successfully. But we're working very closely with China and other countries, and we think it's going to have a very good ending for us, so that I can assure you.
US health officials on Thursday reported the first case of person-to-person transmission in the country. It brings the number of confirmed cases there to 6. The latest patient had not been to China, but his wife had displayed symptoms after returning from the Chinese city of Wuhan, the epicenter of the outbreak. Local health officials said people who have been in contact with the new patient are being monitored. The novel coronavirus has been designated as 2019 NCOV, and the WHO's recent fake declaration means all countries in the world should follow a specific protocol when managing the movement, detection and control of this virus. CGTN's Angelo Coppola has more on the response in South Africa.
The announcement by the World Health Organization of the heightened alert has set off a chain of events in South Africa, centered around the Emergency Operations Center.
It allows us to, for example, within the NICD, we would now start to second staff from other centres within the organisation to support in the laboratory, to support on the epidemiology side. And this would happen within each of the different partner institutions within the Emergency Operations Centre.
Health authorities at the main ports of entry have been promised more temperature testing devices, and Chinese authorities have offered their assistance too.
The Chinese ambassador has also indicated that China has developed a new detection device specifically for coronavirus, and should South Africa need, they said they can make some available. So immediately after this meeting, the Chinese ambassador will actually come with the relevant information and the relevant individuals, and our team here is on standby to evaluate whether in fact this is something that we can take advantage of.
The South African authorities say the manner in which the Chinese health authorities have managed the virus is appropriate.
We are happy that China is managing the way they're doing it in terms of, making sure that people can be observed for a particular period before they actually get out of that area. Every country is going to have that kind of responsibility if you have to deal with this kind of cases.
While South African authorities continue to monitor incoming travellers at the major ports of entry, attention is turned to South Africans who are still in Wuhan.
That there are 165 South African students and 54 teachers in Wuhan, spread around about 13 campuses. Some of them have made contact with the embassy, wanting to know what South Africa is doing. We have given them the reassurance that we are confident that China is taking adequate measures to deal with the virus.
So while there are no cases suspected or otherwise of the coronavirus, the WHO says that they're comfortable with the actions that have been taken by the South African government. They seem to be prepared. Only time will tell. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
The World Health Organization's declaration of the coronavirus outbreak as a global emergency on Thursday was followed by confirmation of more cases overseas. The WHO has said that it is worried about the rise in the number of coronavirus patients. Our correspondent Rebecca Bunton reports now from Geneva.
The WHO's Emergency Committee declared a global health emergency and is particularly concerned about the potential spread of the virus to countries where their health systems are not as robust. The WHO will issue recommendations which are not legally binding but put pressure on countries to follow global standards and can facilitate international funds to poorer countries, for example. It's something that it hopes can help combat the spread of the virus, as more cases were confirmed on Friday, including cases in the UK and an instance of human-to-human transmission in Thailand. The WHO has said that it's impressed with China's response to the outbreak and that the country's actions have helped limit the spread of the virus. But some commentators are now criticising the organisation for its perceived slow response. The WHO says that it doesn't want to enforce any travel or trade restrictions, and by implementing this emergency measure, it can now closely monitor global travel. Rebecca Bunton, CGTN, Geneva.
South Sudan's government has launched a coronavirus screening centre at Juba International Airport. The Health Ministry says it currently has no intention of suspending travel to and from China. CGTN's Patrick Oyer reports.
South Sudan's government says it is putting in place measures to prevent, detect, respond and mitigate the risk of importation of the coronavirus into the country. South Sudan's health ministry says it plans to set up more screening centers at its border entry points. The World Health Organization in South Sudan is donating the equipment. It is also providing training to medical personnel in the country. Juba is calling on travelers to take precautions.
Our humble advice as the government of the Republic of South Sudan to our people is to reduce the trouble to China for a time being. As a government, we will not intervene to suspend the trouble to China.
The health minister says there is no case of coronavirus in South Sudan, but he says vigilance should be maintained. China's ambassador to South Sudan says Beijing is doing all it can to contain the virus. He says China will continue to support South Sudan's health sector.
We don't need to panic. We have made a lot of preparations, and we have the knowledge, we have the relevant equipment, measures. And so China, we are very confident that finally we will win this battle.
The World Health Organization is warning that all countries should be prepared for containment, including active surveillance, early detection, isolation and case management, contact tracing and prevention of onward spread of the virus. South Sudan has one of the most underdeveloped health sectors in the world. The Health Ministry says it fears that the arrival of the coronavirus into the country could present a serious challenge in terms of containment of the virus. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Senegal has been implementing health screenings following the WHO declaration. The main international airport in the capital, Dakar, has installed thermal cameras for coronavirus checks. A medical officer said the technology has been adapted to detect people with a temperature of 38 degrees or more. There are no confirmed cases of coronavirus in Senegal, and test results for one suspected case in Côte d'Ivoire earlier this week has come back negative. Senegal is one of many West African nations able to apply lessons learned from Ebola outbreaks in previous years.
Thanks to what has been put in place, all incoming passengers are screened and observed to see if they are carrying a virus or if they have high temperature. What is important to us essentially is the ongoing operation of the airport. To that end, we have a plan in place that we are going to deploy first of all among our employees. It is important that our employees are protected from contamination, but also all the partners on site.
Well, we talked to Kenyan Cabinet Secretary Raphael Tuju about the novel coronavirus outbreak. Tuju commended China's handling of the virus. He also sent his condolences to loved ones of the 213 victims killed by the coronavirus.
Well, I just complimented the government of the People's Republic of China for some very, very tough steps that they've taken. And I did mention that really very few countries in the world has got that capacity to shut down a whole city. And in this case, they're shutting down many cities. It's a reflection of a lot of courage on the part of the Chinese government. But also you have to compliment the Chinese people who have responded positively to this shutdown by the government, because it's sacrifice. It's affecting them economically, it's affecting families' freedoms, but they've done it. I can only imagine if this was in some other Western countries, it would be very difficult to shut down a city. So it is only compliments to China, and I really, really sincerely believe that because of the unique attributes of the Chinese people and His Excellency the President of China, Xi Jinping, it is only because of that very, very unique aspect of China that this problem is going to be solved. I just said, if any country has got capacity in this world to deal with this challenge, it is China. And all we can do is to encourage them, because they're not only doing it for China, they're doing this for the whole world. So every support that we can give China so that then they can deal with this, I think we should do that. But the most important thing that someone like me would like the Chinese to understand is that if they see any reaction which they feel may be inappropriate, it's not because we have any problems with China. It's because we are so scared and we don't have capacity to deal with it. Well, my message to China is that we congratulate them for the steps that they have taken so far. We urge them to continue to take every step that they can take to address and, combat this challenge, and that we are relying on China. We are all relying on China to save the world with respect to this danger. Wuhan jia you, Chungguo jia you.
Staying in Kenya, staff from the Standard Bank Group donned red garments in solidarity with China. The move marks the Lunar New Year while expressing support for China's fight against the novel coronavirus. It's also part of a global initiative where thousands of employees in 20 countries also took part in the Wear Red for China initiative. Several bank branches made banners and cards to express support, activities designed to reflect on the friendship between the people of China and those across the African continent. Bank staff also hope that the concerted effort by scientists around the world will help to win the war against the coronavirus.
Standing Bank Kenya stands with China.
Red in Chinese signifies and symbolizes luck, joy, and is believed to dispel bad omens. Our staff in dozens across our branches and in head office have worn red to show our support to the people of China who are suffering from the virus. As the situation is being controlled through immense support from the international community, we hope things will get better and things will go back to as we celebrate the year of the rat. Happy New Year. God bless China. God bless Kenya.
I studied in China under the exchange program in 2015. Stanbic Bank wishes you a happy Spring Festival, good health and peace.
Well, we are going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including New Deal averts crippling industrial action by civil servants in Zimbabwe. And we tell you how Nigerian women are fighting back against gender-based violence.
They suddenly woke us up, I think midnight, told us to get dressed, and we are going. They didn't tell us where, but we guessed it would be Roman Island.
This was a place always for banishment.
Already at that time, we knew what the consequences could be. The maximum penalty was death. He was a gymnast and a boxer, and he was strong.
He walked straight to me, he come, take the baby out of my arms, he kissed the baby twice on the cheek, got some tears in his eyes. He was quite emotional at that time. So we become close friends.
In Niger, a new project is providing permanent housing for refugees and internally displaced people. As insecurity in the Sahel continues to spread, humanitarian efforts are looking to balance a short-term response with long-term investment. Here's CGTN's Daniela Pearson with this report.
The town of Walam in Niger houses thousands of Malian refugees. Many of them fled during an Islamist insurgency back in 2012. But more recently, there's been an influx of internally displaced people.
What we've lived through is too much for us. We've suffered so much. We had to drag our belongings on foot, travel with children, walk for 2 days straight, without any water or food, without end.
Refugees are often placed in camps. They make do with temporary shelter, sometimes for years. But aid agencies have started developing out-of-camp solutions, allowing them to access education, health services, and economic opportunity. This housing site hopes to integrate displaced communities into local ones.
Having this house is going to help make my tasks easier, like not having to stake down our shelter all the time. It will help our family stay safe during the rains. And when the rainy seasons come, we have to rebuild the shelter and the wooden stakes.
Families will receive ownership deeds for their new homes, which sit on land donated by the government of Niger.
faut apporter de l'aide humanitaire. Ça, c'est clair.
People who are displaced always have urgent needs for food, medicine, shelter, sanitation, and more. But very rapidly, even during the humanitarian phase, we need to think about the long term and give people more autonomy, which leads to a more dignified life, a better life.
Beaucoup plus de dignité.
The project is also a livelihoods initiative. The workers are from both the refugee and host communities. They're learning to make energy-efficient bricks, which use less cement than traditional ones. Over the next year and a half, the goal is to build 1,000 brick houses in Walam. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
Zimbabwe's government and civil servant representatives have finally struck a deal to raise minimum wages. The agreement hopes to avert further industrial action and end months of negotiation. CGTN's Farai Makatuya has this report.
The Apex Council, an umbrella body of unions representing state employees, agreed to a deal that will see the lowest paid government worker receiving an increment of 139%, raising their salaries to 2,500 Zimbabwe dollars, the equivalent of about $150 per month. Civil servants had threatened to go on strike over low wages eroded by galloping inflation, whose annual rate is estimated to be over 500%. Despite periodic cushioning allowances meant to mitigate the escalating cost of living, public servants insisted they could not get by, with some, including teachers and nurses, reporting for duty just 2 days a week. Ordinary citizens who hope normalcy will now be restored to some services that had been disrupted have welcomed the agreement. However, the increase is likely to place an additional burden on Treasury, which had been warned by the IMF, amongst others, against unsustainable increments which are likely to derail cost-cutting reforms. Farai Makutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Well, staying in Zimbabwe, where drought has killed at least 45,000 cattle across the country, the conditions have particularly hit smallhold farmers.
There's been welcome rainfall in recent days. It's rejuvenated the vegetation, providing much-needed grazing for emaciated cattle. But it came too late for some that had already succumbed. Livson Machivenyika has kept the heads of the cattle he's lost. In total, 8 have died since November.
At the beginning I felt so much pain, but eventually I became numb and stopped crying over the losses. There was no one for me to cry to.
That's because everyone else in his village is in the same boat. Carcasses of Virginia Pahlela's cows that dropped where they stood.
They were the reason why we stayed in the village. They enabled us to work the land and feed our families. I used to get 30 to 40 buckets of milk per day for my 17 cows. Now, they're all gone.
Desperate villagers here tried literally everything to save their animals, including plucking down some of the grass from their thatched roofs, wetting it, salting it, and feeding it to their cattle to try and build back their strength. But it was all in vain. They are bereft of ideas on how they will bounce back from this.
The price of cattle will go up, and only those who are well off will afford to restock.
But this community is still in peril.
It's not raining again, so we won't be able to get any food from the land. Also, if you look around, the vegetation hasn't fully recovered, so the few animals that are still alive may also starve.
Government is mounting an immediate and long-term response.
We are working with other arms of government as well as some development partners to try and address the water situation by way of either digging new boreholes or rehabilitating the already existing boreholes. We've also got what we call the cattle breeding centers. These centers are to do with the planting of grasses and under irrigation, and then we finish off the animals under those pieces of land.
Hopefully the impact will be felt in hard-hit areas that have been left counting the devastating costs. Farai Makutuya, CGTN, Mwenezi, Zimbabwe.
Well, it's Brexit Day, which means the United Kingdom is set to leave the European Union. That's in just a few hours' time. Friday marks the end of Britain's 47-year membership to the EU. It's taken the country more than 3 years to leave the bloc. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is marking the day in a festive manner with sparkling wine as he exited a manufacturing facility in northern England. Johnson said it was the biggest joy of his life. Well, for more on that story, we are now joined by CGTN's Nawid Jabakil, who is in London standing by for us. Well, as you're saying, just a few hours left until the UK leaves the EU. What's the latest you have there?
Yeah, just over 5.5 hours, Karen, until Britain ends its 47-year membership of the European Union. The mood here in Westminster today, fairly unusually quiet, actually, rather subdued, perhaps reflecting the mood up and down this country. Some people are happy about today's decision. Some people will see it as a disappointing day and one that they'll treat with great sadness. 3.5 years ago, the country voted in a referendum, a very narrowly fought referendum, 17 million people roughly voting to leave the European Union, 16 million almost choosing to stay in. And really that's led to the political wrangling we've seen since then. That's finally coming to an end tonight. Boris Johnson says at least that's the mandate he ran on in the election last month, which led us to this point. But we've seen protests again around Westminster here near Downing Street, and there's a few more planned for the rest of the day as well. A large pro-Brexit rally planned around Westminster later this evening. But really the key question for Boris Johnson, you mentioned he celebrated with wine there, sparkling wine, English sparkling wine and English cheese as well, we're hearing that he might have, symbolically very important. But in terms of celebrations, this is a day that the Prime Minister is treading very carefully. In his speech, a televised address he'll give just an hour before Brexit happens at 11 p.m. GMT, he'll say, quote, "Our job, my job, is to bring this country together and take us forward." So he's very aware that there will be lots of people up and down this country who will be seeing today as a day not for celebration, but one that they really hope they wouldn't see. Karen.
And now focus is already shifting to a trade deal between the two sides. What are we likely to expect in the coming days?
Yeah, as soon as Britain leaves the European Union, formally we enter what's known as a transition period. That's 11 months until the end of this year for the two sides to thrash out a trade deal, a very comprehensive one. Boris Johnson thinks he can win in those 11 months, ranging from things like how people will be able to travel from one set of countries to the UK and the other way, to fishing rights, how much fish will be allowed to be caught by either side in their waters, labour rights, employment rights, plenty on the agenda. Boris Johnson is confident he can get that done in 11 months. The Europeans say that's simply not enough time. Brussels says they'll need more to thrash out a real negotiated deal. Boris Johnson is confident he can get that. But the other thing is, alongside this trade deal, Britain will, for the first time in 47 years, be allowed to talk to other countries and start striking trade deals with other countries. The US is top of the agenda, as a Prime Minister spokesman has told me numerous times in recent weeks, but also other countries, namely across Africa as well, and further afield, including Japan, Australia, China and New Zealand. So plenty of skepticism really on the European side and among experts as well, that the transition period of 11 months will be enough for the two sides to come to an agreement. But the focus this evening in the next few hours is Britain formally leaving the European Union. Karen.
Okay, thank you very much for that update. That was CGTN's Nawid Jabakil there on Brexit Day, and it's just a few hours to go before the UK leaves the European Union. Well, now it's time for all the business news. Here's Hannah.
Thank you so much, Karen. Well, here's what's coming up in business. Mobile operators Airtel and Telkom appeal against tough merger conditions set by Kenya's regulators. And the IMF warns South Africa against delays on vital economic reforms.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Time for your business news. Airtel and Telkom Kenya have appealed against merger conditions set by the country's competitions authority last December. Kenya's competition watchdog gave a nod for the planned merger. The regulator, however, set out a raft of conditions, including retaining some staff. It wants the merged company to honor all existing government contracts. Airtel Telkom, as the combined company will be called, has also been barred from selling or transferring some of its operating and frequency spectrum licenses until their duration expires. Airtel Telkom is expected to create stronger competition for Safaricom, which at the moment dominates Kenya's telecom sector with a market share of roughly 62.4% in mobile subscriptions. Well, the International Monetary Fund has urged the South African government to speed up reforms to revive the economy. This week, the lender published the outcome of its consultations with the government and other authorities. It based the finding on the assumption that the partial reform implementation and continued governance would lift South Africa's business confidence. However, while the IMF forecasts South Africa to grow from 0.4% in 2019 to 0.8% this year, the international financier has warned that per capita growth will continue to contract in the near term. This is after Africa's most industrialized economy recorded its fifth consecutive decline in 2019. A top UN official has warned that the international community would pay a terrible price if it fails to help rebuild Sudan's dilapidated economy. According to United Nations Development Program Administrator, it is up to the Sudanese people to decide what kind of society they want. Akeem Steiner, however, says Sudan will need help from the international community to build that society. Months after the ousting of longtime ruler Omar al-Bashir last April, Sudan is at the moment in the midst of a series of challenges driven by an economic crisis. That includes foreign debt of more than $60 billion, inflation at about 60%, soaring unemployment, as well as a chronic shortage of fuel and foreign currency.
The story of Sudan in the year 2020 is not the story of the previous government. It is a story in which waiting for too long to actually step in and support this process may have a terrible price to pay. Our role, that of the World Bank, the IMF, organizations that have studied this in many different countries, we have to come up with wiser and smarter advice than simply saying to Sudan, well, you are failing in your reform if you don't do X or Y. Here is a country in which the youth, and particularly the women, have not only managed to pull off a peaceful revolution in large part, but they actually have an agenda to build a developmental state. The international community must recognize how unusual and how extraordinarily helpful this is in a region that otherwise is providing more and more worrying news about political stability, about extremism.
Well, and more on our earlier story on Brexit. As the UK prepares to leave the EU, Scotland's First Minister is calling for another independence referendum. Could Brexit also lead to the breakup of the United Kingdom? Our correspondent Holly Hudson reports from Edinburgh.
The day before Britain leaves the EU in the Scottish capital, and there are signs that people here aren't happy. Thousands are set to take to the streets in Edinburgh tomorrow. Mike Blackshaw is organising the rally. He says the movement for independence has gained momentum since Brexit.
Brexit has changed the format of how a lot of people see the SNP, see the independence movement. A lot of people who were never in that move, were never interested in independence, suddenly are now massively interested.
The majority of voters in Scotland opposed Brexit. Justification nationalist leader Nicola Sturgeon says for people to have another say on independence. Yesterday, by a small margin, she won the support of the Scottish Parliament for a new vote, but Boris Johnson has ruled it out. Legally, the devolved government here at Holyrood needs Westminster to transfer its powers in order to hold a second referendum. But the Prime Minister says Scotland had their chance 6 years ago when 55% of voters here rejected independence. Latest opinion polls suggest that support for it hasn't changed much since 2014. Back then, there was concern over what such a seismic break would do to the country's economy and businesses if it were to relinquish billions from central government. So what has changed?
A huge amount has changed since 2014, a material change of circumstances, and that material change of circumstances is Scotland's views on something as big as Brexit being totally ignored. We're losing our place in the single market. We're losing the freedom of movement of people, which is so central to our economy.
Experts believe a referendum will depend on the results of next year's Scottish parliamentary elections.
If the SNP secures a majority government, they will have a strong case. They will run on a mandate to hold another referendum. And it would be difficult to see how the UK government can maintain that position for a long period of time.
The SNP's bid for independence has so far fallen on deaf ears at Downing Street. On Friday, when Brexit becomes official, Nicola Sturgeon will give a speech on how she plans to make them listen. The EU flag will also be kept flying over the Edinburgh Parliament building. An act of defiance she will no doubt be hoping both Westminster and Brussels notice. Holly Hudson, CGTN, Edinburgh.
Well, Africa's first drone academy has opened in Malawi, where students are learning how to make and fly drones, collect and analyze data. The institute builds on the work of a pilot scheme with the support of UN Children's Fund UNICEF, in which drones have been used to deliver medical supplies, monitor crops and map cholera outbreaks. CGTN's Terry Wangari has more.
For Ethiopian aeronautical engineer Lydia Elias, building and piloting a drone to support humanitarian and development projects on the continent of her birth has been a lifelong dream. Now, as a student of Africa's first drone academy, she's about to make it a reality.
After me learning, I try to teach my people. I also have an aerospace club, so I'm trying to transfer this knowledge to the students that are payloads in my country.
The institute is in Malawi and builds on the work of a pilot scheme launched in 2017 with the support of the UN Children's Fund, UNICEF. The scheme uses drones to deliver medical supplies, monitor crops, and map cholera outbreaks. As they become smaller, more reliable, and more affordable, their role in such projects becomes certain to increase on a continent prone to natural disasters and dotted with isolated communities. Lydia and 25 others from across Africa are the first batch of students at the academy. They're learning how to make and fly drones, collect and analyze data over a 12-week course.
For a short time that I've been here, I've been able to create this drone because this drone is the drone which I made from my own ends through the use of provided aided materials. We provided all these materials and how to go about. Then I followed all the procedures until I make this drone.
Well, this is a very significant step to help young people obtain 21st century skills. This decade, which has just started, is going to be digital. And to help young people improve their skills, learn about digital technology, learn about drones, will be an incredible step forward, not only for Malawi, but for many other African countries as well.
The academy plans to train 150 students to build and pilot drones by 2021. Funding from UNICEF partners has paid tuition to the first cohort of 26 students. It's expected that by 2022, the academy will run a tuition-free 2-year master's degree program in drone technology. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
Well, that's all the business news we have for you for now. But ahead on Global Business, Ethiopia adopts a new investment law but locks out foreign investors from its lucrative banking and insurance sectors. We will have more on that story and other business news making headlines. But for now, on with your current affairs with Karen.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Well, we are going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including... We tell you how Nigerian women are fighting back against gender-based violence.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
South Africa has been enjoying the spectacular sight of millions of butterflies taking to the skies. The fluttering creatures have left their natural habitat in the Kalahari Desert and are heading in a northeasterly direction in search of food and water. While the mass flights are usually a common occurrence, this is the largest cross-regional movement in almost 60 years. CGTN's Julie Shear has more.
Millions of pioneer white caper butterflies are making their flight from the semi-arid Kalahari in the west of South Africa to the wetter northeastern areas. It's the biggest dispersal of these gentle creatures since 1966 and has brought a flutter to Johannesburg.
A new season is in the air, right? And it means that beautiful things are coming because the butterfly signifies a changing of something that was unwanted, ugly, terrible, like worm, into something that is beautiful, colorful, and fit for the skies.
I thought it should have been global warming. Maybe they just came out of nowhere because it's too hot for them or anything. But anyway, they just make the sky bright. So everything looked bright because of the butterflies. So I love butterflies.
It's quite beautiful because you don't tend to see butterflies as often anymore. Yeah, and it's a nice experience. It's like, it makes you appreciate life in a sense. It's like the beauty of life.
Also known as brown-veined butterflies, their dispersal happens every few months when there's a population explosion, but this year has been a rare phenomenon.
This one is certainly very unusually large, which is why everyone's noticing it. So there seems to be some genetic cue that they know they need to move, but they are laying eggs along the route. There's also a bit of a relay. I mean, the butterflies are also found here in the Johannesburg area, and those butterflies are also emerging and joining in this dispersal.
While many South Africans see this as a good sign, experts say it usually happens after prolonged dry conditions.
It's a sign of stress. You know, we've had many years of drought in the Kalahari, which has led to the many other animals, their numbers to crash. And that's permitted the pioneer caper whites to have this population explosion. But we would rather see the butterflies and their predators more in balance.
This year's butterfly migration has brought joy and excitement as they make their way across the country to the east coast of Africa. Sadly, this is the first and last journey for these little insects. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
A 2018 study by the Thomson Reuters Foundation ranked Nigeria as the 9th most dangerous place to be a woman. From abductions to abuse, Nigerian women face many challenges. Now, a local NGO is empowering women to fight back. CGTN's Astatal has more on that.
This is Adiola's first self-defense class. After surviving years of abuse, she's come to Elite Box Gym to learn how to fight back. But the notion of a woman defending herself is still not widely accepted in Nigeria.
It is strange, very, very strange to hear that a woman wants to defend herself if she finds herself in a position where she has to. Nobody's going to listen to that. They will just tell you that you're not being submissive as a woman. You know, they tell you that you've become a feminist, and so because you've started listening to all these things that are happening.
The 2-hour training session is free. This is part of the gym's collaboration with Women Impacting Nigeria, a local NGO advocating for women's rights.
When it comes to females getting involved in anything to do with physicality, so specifically combat sports and defending themselves, there is a taboo. The taboo stems from the fact that societal pressures, environmental perception, and also within women themselves as well, not having the self-belief that they can actually achieve and do this or what is required to become proficient at self-defense.
In addition to training, the women get the opportunity to share their stories.
It's an alternative. It's a new way of doing the whole, sit around in a circle and everybody tells their story. Because here you're meeting women who have experienced the same things that you've experienced, but some people are silent about it. Do you know what I mean? So you come here and, during the class, when you partner up in the examples that, the teacher is giving, you can also, share a few words or even after the class.
While it was only Adiola's first session, she walked out with a new sense of confidence.
It was really eye-opening. I liked the fact that I can protect myself. Yes, at least I can protect myself, and if I wanted to attack, I can attack quickly. Yeah, so it went well.
As stories continue to emerge of the abuses carried out against Nigerian women, this class hopes many more women like Adiola will find the strength to fight back. Astatal, CGTN.
We've got all the sports news.